Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Fixed Wireless and BEAD, the Fast Path to Maximizing Your Funds, presented by Fierce Wireless and sponsored by Samsung. I'm Mary Grace Stevenson, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'd like to start off by introducing today's speaker. We have TJ Mann, Senior Director of Regional Operators at Samsung, Rob Falkner, Chief Commercial Officer at T3 Broadband, Jeff Hainan, Vice President of Del Oro Group. You can read their full bios on the left side of your window by selecting the Speakers tab. But before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to review. To access additional resources for today's presentation, please click the Handouts tab on the left side of your screen. If you need to access closed captions throughout the presentation, you can access them in the bottom right corner of your video player. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available to watch on demand within 24 hours. And one last note, we'd love to hear from you, so throughout the presentation, please submit any questions you have using the Questions and Answers tab on the left side of your screen. Time permitting, we will conclude with a Q&A session. And with that said, we're ready to begin. Rob, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mary Grace. I will be speaking primarily about the BEAD program and some of the economics surrounding it to provide a basis for why we believe fixed wireless is a critical component of the program. Basically, the BEAD program is unique relative to other federally funded broadband programs in that it's not managed by the FCC, and it has a number of non-technical goals associated with it and stakeholders beyond just the traditional carriers, the government funding organization, and other aspects around that. So I want to kind of lay out first what the BEAD program is primarily, and then go into the timeline, and then go into more specifics around that and where the funding is, and then some economic examples of why fixed wireless should be here. So the BEAD program, as I mentioned, is actually not managed by the FCC. Most of the broadband programs really come under two jurisdictions today, the FCC or the USDA for the rural cooperatives. In this case, the Department of Commerce, NTIA, is running the BEAD program and providing the foundational rules associated with it, managing the funding of it. It's basically a $42.5 billion program that's come out of a number of the most recent federal budgets associated with ensuring the digital divide is crossed and that we are providing broadband to as many locations across the U.S. that are not able to have broadband and treat this more like a utility. The goal is to take this money, apply it to the states, which I'll get into more details on, and then out of the $42.5 billion, there's also a matching component associated with this, a minimum 25% that every carrier that would implement a broadband program has to do. So there's across the U.S. and its territories, Puerto Rico, Guam, and other locations, there's about $53 billion needed to start the funding for this. So that's kind of our basis for when we start talking about the discussion of the funding. But the goal is to provide a minimum 100 megabits down, 20 megabits upload across the U.S. to those areas that are deemed unserved or underserved. An unserved location, which is just decided by the FCC's Broadband Data Collection Program, it's termed a broadband serviceable location. An unserved location is a location that cannot get at least 25/3 service. That means 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. An underserved location is a location that can get at least 25/3, but cannot reach at least 120. So these are the two primary definitions for those areas that are to be covered by the program. And again, most of the prior broadband funding, Connect America Fund 1 and 2, RDOF, the USDA Reconnect program, those are traditionally rural programs. The BEAD program is not exclusive to rural, although I think the majority of the homes that will be covered are rural, but also includes those areas of urban centers, suburban areas that were not able to achieve any sort of these broadband capabilities due to prior economic decisions, other reasons for doing that. So it covers both urban and rural locations, and it's important to know that so that you're not looking at just the open areas of the West or the Midwest or the South, or there's areas that cannot get a lot today. We'll cover urban areas. The stakeholders too are a little different in this. Again, traditionally it was the FCC, the carriers, and then getting those markets covered among those different programs that I mentioned previously. In this case, the language is actually kind of unique. The program administrator is the NTIA. The grant recipients are actually the states. And that means that the state broadband offices needed to be created to support this. A number of states have a state broadband office. A number had to get those created. And they're actually what's called the grant recipients. So the states themselves are the grant recipients, and then the grants that go to the carriers are deemed subgrantees. The carriers themselves, the organizations receiving it, doesn't necessarily have to be a carrier. It could be a municipality, it could be a private organization, it could be a tribe on native lands. Those are the subgrantees, and that language actually is critical so that you understand the terminology of how this is. But again, unlike just those that are funding and those that are building, the stakeholders also include communities of interest. Those areas that want to make sure that among certain aspects of access, economic ability to provide the service and use the service, there are a number of other communities of interest that are involved with this. We look at that from an economic standpoint, a social standpoint, a location. As I mentioned, the tribes earlier, they're part of this. And it's going to be unique to each state. Some states don't have any, for example, tribal lands. Others may have a very different economic skew of their population. And those have to be part of your subgrant application as a carrier to obtain this funding. That'll be part of the program. Now, on the schedule standpoint, we're getting up to the first level of the requirements by the states. I believe back in August, the $42.5 billion was allocated across the states and territories. And that kicked off the process by the state and the organizational broadband offices to submit their phase 1 and phase 2 applications to the NTIA, which are due December 27th. Those, I believe, all phase 2 were submitted as of last week. So we're about 3 weeks out from needing everything packaged up that's still open to be submitted to the NTIA. All the states have accepted their money. No one has said no to that. And now the clock starts ticking. The NTIA will review those proposals. They may ask for some corrections, some modification, clarifications. But we're expecting sometime Q1, Q2, late Q1, really between Q2 and Q3 next year, that the state broadband offices will open their opportunities to apply as a subgrantee for the money in each state. The first $100 million is supposed to go out fairly quickly next year, but the timing of the overall program is that all broadband networks that have to be built by the subgrantees have to be completed in 2028. So basically, as I'm putting it, December 31st, 2028. So they're going to have 4-ish years to get this by the time they get the money rolling. It's going to be a very aggressive program on a nationwide basis, but managed by the states. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different requirements in this based upon learnings that the FCC has experienced and that they've promoted among each advanced program that they've done, that the NTI has further consolidated and put other stipulations around this. You have to have a documentation of capability. You've got to be registered with the government. You also have to have matching funds. The NTIA is requiring 2 aspects on this that are fairly unique. One, at this point, you need to have a matching fund. There are letters of credit, and there are some waivers capability that were put out in November in terms of easing this for some of the smaller subgrantee applicants. But you still need to have in some source matching funds in the bank today, as well as an additional letter of credit covering both of those, covering each 25% of your build. So if you had a $10 million build, you would need to have $2.5 million in the bank and an additional letter of credit for $2.5 million. That can be very challenging as you go down market compared to some of the more regional, super regional, national carriers, but the NTIA seems to be working towards alleviating that. But also, unlike just saying, I'm going to build this in a certain time frame, they want a published network technology plan, an operations plan, a build plan, as well as a revenue and marketing plan. Your go-to-market plan is critical so that you can actually execute and customers will actually take the service. So all that planning needs to have started already if the first funding is going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months after December this year. It's critical to start thinking about if you're going to go after BEAD, how you're going to do it and where. It may not have to be everything you're looking for, but you really do need to start the planning process. Again, the application will probably take a 1 to 3 month period to actually pull all this information together, document it, and submit it. Again, as you submit the application as a sub-grantee, you've got to have your letters of credit ready, your matching funds already in the bank. You have to have audited financials and all the things listed here, including, again, a cybersecurity plan and other aspects in terms of what equipment you're going to use. The NTIA is requiring this to follow the Buy America, Build America. And within that, certain components have to be manufactured within the U.S. Fiber, I think the fiber conduit. There are certain waivers at a certain percent, I believe 60% for fiber optic, ONT, and OLTs. We don't see many other components today, but there could be some changes as this gets finalized over the next few months. And then obviously, once you get the award, if you are an award recipient, you do have filings on an annual basis that you have to file with the government, as well as other reporting mechanisms. So what technology is available for BEAD? First, I think it's very natural. Fiber, FTTX solutions, PON solutions, absolutely that's a requirement in most states at a minimum to do this. But that's not the only. Most of the cable companies will be putting DOCSIS solutions out, or a mix of DOCSIS and fiber as they expand out. That's an allowed solution. Again, 120 service is the minimum. Fixed wireless is allowed, and this is what we'll be talking about primarily today. But it is within the licensed spectrum as a requirement. So those carriers that have licensed spectrum, or if they're using CBRS, which is deemed licensed by rule, you can use fixed wireless broadly to support this. However, unlicensed spectrum, 2.4 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz, currently the 6 gigahertz, we don't know which way that will go, are not applicable for BEAD funding, although people are advocating for some of that spectrum to be opened up just because of the nature and the economics associated with this. Additionally, beyond unlicensed fixed wireless, satellite services are not allowed. This is not something that will be considered. It truly will be a terrestrial-based service for the overall BEAD program. And we won't go into the eye chart here. This basically just represents the range of money associated with the different states. I only showed the states. I didn't put the territories in here. But Texas was the largest winner with $3.1 billion. Every state territory was guaranteed at least $100 million. So areas such as Rhode Island, District of Columbia, Delaware, they had those minimums in that basis. And then other states had mixes associated with that. You'll see Missouri was over $1 billion, California, and then a mix associated with that. So there's a lot of money coming in here, driven by both population, but also those areas that currently within the BDC program were deemed unserved or underserved. Now, of course, with the BDC map updated a couple of weeks ago, another 1.2 million, 1.1 million, I believe, unserved locations were deemed at least underserved or served. So as that's refining, this provides potentially a larger pool of money for some of those areas to be served, which is good for everybody. So how much to spend on coverage? If you take the money that was allocated to the just within the U.S. States, not the territories, about 40.5 billion. Add 25% of that, it's about 51 billion within just the BEAD budget. How you choose to spend that money, how you choose to go after a sub-grantee application is critical in terms of your technology solution, your ability to serve. I did a thought experiment and said, look, out of the 7.2 million unserved locations in the US based upon the BDC version 3 map, let's just apply all $51 billion to that. That would be about $7,100 per broadband serviceable location to serve that, which is a fairly large amount of cash to go do that. But remember, BEAD is going after the traditionally difficult markets. Some areas have never had a government program. These are very difficult markets. And if you were to apply a traditional fiber cost for that, in our historical background working with a number of clients for the past 10 years across CAF, CAF2, the RDOF program, and others, they would typically see, for example, in a rural market, $3,000 to $6,000 per broadband serviceable location 3, 4, 5 years ago before inflation for the cost to go serve a BSL with fiber. So $7,100 per location is a little more than that. With inflation, it may be about break even on the same amount. However, those same customers tell us when they go to the extremely difficult areas to reach, they're at least in the $8,000 to $10,000 per BSL to go serve if they were to do this with fiber. And what that enlightens me on is that if all the BEAD money, nothing but the BEAD money was served just the unserved locations, 7.2 million, it would be challenging to serve everybody at the $7,100 per BSL cost, not to mention the 4 million underserved locations, those that can't get to 120 service would not have any funding at all. And this is a foundational discussion of why we believe economics and the technology go hand in hand in terms of what you choose in what area. And that's why we look at fixed wireless as a way to extend your budget, provide 120 service to as many homes as possible, and still meet your BEAD applicant requirements. So in an example that I pulled from the BDC map a while back, I found a town out west. I won't mention where or which state or anything, but it was a town that's about a half square mile in distance from the city center. And then around that are a number of farms and ranches and other areas that surround the town that are all part of it. Within that city center, the area marked in blue, you've got about 100 broadband serviceable locations. And this had dial-up in this town. This does not have access to anything other than satellites. And satellite can't be used. You have to look at alternatives. You're going to be building a new network here. What I did on the market was I went up and down the street. I actually did a route mile on this and said there was about 7 route miles for fiber on this, at about 25,000 a route mile for aerial out in this part of the country is not an uncommon price to go build an aerial network. And I built laterals across each of that, and I just said, look, it's about $175,000 to go build this, and it's about $1,800 per broadband serviceable location within that blue area, the downtown area. And that's a very competitive, very normal price for most urban markets. But the problem is that's just the downtown area. What happens when you go outside? Well, the next set of homes, when we did this, I took a spur of fiber about 3 miles to cover 8 homes. That's close to $10,000 for the next set of homes to go look at and cover by fiber. And suddenly you're now in that $10,000 range that I mentioned earlier. However, if we take a fixed wireless solution and approach this, put a mast up in the center of town and started covering the 50 homes that were capable to be reached within 3-ish miles outside of town, you could put a site in there for less than $200,000. That's an expensive site, but you could put it in for less than that and get in that $4,000 per broadband serviceable location and get to at least 120 service. And that's how you look at this and should look at this, that fixed wireless can be used and must be used to augment areas that will either consume all of your fiber budget and not serve enough people, or eliminate actually those homes entirely because you just can't afford to serve it. It has to be used and must be used as consideration for many markets to ensure that the BEAD program is serving those that are unserved and underserved today. And with that, I will pass it over to Jeff.
All right, thanks a lot, Rob. I'm going to quickly address why fixed wireless is such an important piece of the BEAD program and will play a critical role in connecting the unserved and underserved areas that are intended to be connected here through the BEAD program. So, really, I think with many of the reasons that Rob just went over, we at Deloro Group, in terms of our technology forecasting, we're clearly expecting fixed wireless access to play a big role in these BEAD-funded deployments. I think it's important to note that that position has evolved over time, as the state commissioners, as the money has been allocated. Many of those commissioners have realized that they're just not there hasn't been enough allocated for them to address their unserved and underserved locations. Clearly the BEAD program prioritized fiber really as the most future-proof technology. As Rob mentioned, the bulk of the spending will go towards those fiber projects. But as the position has evolved, as this project has evolved, the states have put together their proposals, and are still in the process of putting together the second versions or second drafts of their proposals. They've developed what are called these high cost thresholds for the locations where the cost of delivering fiber would take up a much larger and outsized percentage of the total BEAD funds. And so what they've come to realize there is that fiber has to be balanced with other technologies, and those technologies have to be able to provide acceptable coverage at a lower cost. And that's really where fixed wireless is stepping in, playing a greater role across a growing number of states. I've had conversations with some of the state commissioners, and their perspectives have evolved over time. And certainly in those states with really difficult or mountainous or difficult topographies, you can think of the ones, we've got a few listed here, but the emphasis on fiber has always had to be balanced, and so more states are following in those footsteps and coming up with more realistic plans that focus on connectivity as opposed to just the technologies themselves. I think also the use of fixed wireless access isn't just going to be limited to these tier 2 and tier 3 operators as well as the municipalities. Even tier 1 operators have now come out publicly and said that they are expressing interest in using their FWA networks to address these BEAD projects. Both AT&T and Verizon have said as much. And that's in addition to their own ongoing expansions of FWA in some of the more urban and suburban markets, where they've been very successful in pitching that as an alternative to fixed broadband services, or now just in early stages in the case of AT&T, a way to hold on to DSL subscribers before fiber network upgrades. The last point I'll make about why fixed wireless. I've been looking at the broadband market and analyzing equipment trends for over 15, 17 years now. Been through many of these projects, and including BIP and BTOP, CAF, CAF2, RDOF, many of these projects. And there's one uniform characteristic of all of them, and that is that they all take longer to complete than initially expected. And I really think the same is likely to happen with BEAD here. I mean, this is the largest program subsidization effort that we've seen in a long time, if forever. And so the longer those implementations take, the greater the chance that fixed wireless continues to play an increasing role in getting people connected. Ultimately, this is about connectivity and not technology. So I think that's ultimately what's going to be important to keep in mind. So as a result of all of those kind of qualitative assessments, we're really expecting both FWA subscribers and the CPE shipments to continue increasing here in North America, as you've got still those larger tier 1 operators expanding their 5G sub-6 offerings. And then you add the wireless ISPs, tier 2, tier 3 operators using a combination of CBRS and 6 gigahertz spectrum, really to improve the rate and reach of their offerings, and then also to address a greater slice of their rural and underserved markets, possibly where connectivity was based on unlicensed 5 gig spectrum, which is deemed unserved by the NTIA. For those WISPs, or the wireless ISPs, we see them using the GAA, or General Authorized Access tier of that CBRS spectrum, sometimes standalone or sometimes in conjunction with that 6 gigahertz unlicensed spectrum, to address those subscriber bases. But I think here that the bigger takeaway from this particular chart, if you project back to 2018 and before, is really just how quickly FWA has matured and grown in really a short amount of time. Prior to 2020, the FWA market was limited primarily to wireless ISPs. And then T-Mobile began to roll out its home internet service, really targeting cable and DSL customers with that aggressive $50 price point, no contract, and of course other benefits for mobile customers as well. That service has really taken off. T-Mobile, I think, counts now at the end of Q3 about 4.2 million subs, and Verizon as well now counts about 2.7 million subs. And AT&T, as I mentioned, is really just getting started with its own 5G service, and we expect that they'll add meaningful subscriber numbers as well. But all in all, those tier 1 operators, I think, have demonstrated that fixed wireless is clearly a viable technology option for fixed broadband services. We're seeing churn rates for those services being consistent with existing fixed broadband technologies, and that, of course, suggests that reliability metrics and performance for FWA is comparable to fixed broadband as well. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to TJ.
Thank you, Jeff. And as we delve into this Samsung solution segment, what we thought would be useful is to take a moment and just to review the development of wireless broadband and look how it's evolved over time. Just a little bit of a closer look at this concept of FWA. So at its root, it's a fairly simple idea. The use of wireless networks to deliver that last mile, final stretch, providing homes with high-speed internet. But if you think about it, it's a fairly big shift from the traditional or conventional models of broadband delivery, which over the past 20 years or so have predominantly been some form of wireline technology, be it telephone lines, DSL, cable, more recently fiber. And today, while fixed wireless is catching up on speeds, on reliability, and it's growing overall, in many cases, it's really the only practical solution especially for areas where fiber or cable face a logistical challenge for deployment, or it's just too expensive. So from a historical standpoint, the use of wireless networks is not necessarily a new concept. It has been around for a while. And what we've done on this slide is sort of map that evolution over the past decade or so. So this chart, sometimes gets referred to as the technology hype cycle. Is here we examine how basically emerging technologies go from peak of early adopters with a lot of enthusiasm through then a chasm of issues and disillusionment, a period of slow growth, to finally then ramp up this slope of mass market adoption and customer success. So we rewind to the WISP industry that we just talked about, and the growth within WISPs and wireless broadband has been quite impressive. Wireless ISPs have been instrumental in bringing broadband to unserved and underserved communities. And if you look at it, those early WISP deployments utilized radios in the unlicensed band, or the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi band, operating at the time in a spectrum that wasn't very crowded, with very few devices per household, typically laptops and computers, and 25 meg service was typically sufficient. We fast forward to 2023, and that landscape has seen a remarkable shift. We describe this as a tectonic shift because if you look at the Deloitte's connectivity survey, average U.S. household now has over 22 internet-connected devices, consuming anywhere between 500 gigs to a terabyte of monthly data. So, as operators now there are looking to deploy wireless services for broadband, there are basically two main choices today. There are continuing to be these proprietary systems. They've essentially just moved from the 5 gigahertz band now to the 3.5 CBRS bands, but it's essentially a closed system where you buy a radio, you buy their own CPE, and then that's one path. The other is, the most of the growth today happening around these standards-based 3GPP solutions that are either 5G, LTE, and that is the segment that we are starting to see a lot of growth within. So while proprietary systems may offer initially sort of that ease of deployment, because typically they're selling you a radio node, their own CPE, many cases a very expensive CPE, because once you're locked in, that can become a pretty huge capex challenge. But and these solutions perform quite well with a limited set of devices. If you're looking at speed tests or throughput tests, they perform quite well. But the challenge starts to show up when device counts increase. When you're looking at, say, 100 devices camping onto a radio, they really start to not scale very well, and especially in non-line of sight, or even when there is not near line of sight type of environments, these solutions tend not to perform very well. So in our view, and there is enough data, some of which we'll talk about, the evolution of fixed wireless technology is now standardizing around 3GPP, and this marks a significant shift in how FWA is getting deployed, with more spectrum being available, especially in mid bands like the C band or CBRS in millimeter wave. Potentially, as we just talked about, FCC looking at maybe opening up or making the 6 gigahertz band also licensed by rule. The deployment of fixed wireless has now started to move from unlicensed, these proprietary closed systems towards more open, standards-based solutions. And this also, by the way, allows operators to offer potentially mobile services, because it's all 3GPP based. We were able to even offer roaming services in some areas, and create additional revenue streams. And what we're starting to see is 5G now can truly deliver fiber-like speeds, and you can get hundreds of users that can be supported without any type of a vendor lock-in, because the CPE ecosystem for LTE and 5G is vast. You've got over 24 vendors with all kinds of CPEs that have varying capabilities, and there's just a very robust ecosystem of products and solutions available around fixed wireless using 3GPP. And most notably, the last couple of years, what has happened is as Jeff just pointed out, with the tier one operators, Verizon and T-Mobile particularly having stepped in, these operators have now launched a range of FWA, fixed wireless broadband service offerings, injecting a lot of capital, bringing new energy into an ecosystem which was already booming. And together, as just pointed out, between just T-Mobile and Verizon, there's over 6.5 million FWA subscribers. And this surge has really transformed fixed wireless from what was sort of a niche type of a solution into a much more of a mainstream play. And it's really starting to emerge as a formidable competitor to traditional cable and fiber services. And the very fact that these solutions that are being deployed by the tier ones are 100% 3GPP based is a clear signal that fixed wireless on 5G has arrived, and it is here to stay. So we move to the next slide, and here, this is an introduction to Samsung. Hopefully, Samsung does not need a long introduction. We are a top 5 global brand alongside companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And this, by the way, is according to the latest Interbrand survey that just came out 2 weeks ago. The networks business of Samsung that we are a part of, we are a leading provider of mobile infrastructure solutions. We've got major tier one customers in nearly every region worldwide. And when it comes to 5G leadership, Samsung is one of the biggest contributors to 5G standards. We have a large set of folks that are involved with 3GPP standardization work, holding 7 chair or vice chair positions within key 3GPP working groups, both on the RAN side as well as the core side. Samsung also has a large number of patents. I believe we are the number one company worldwide when it comes to 5G patent ownership, with over 1,700 5G patents granted and over 2,500 patents that are filed. So clearly, very deep roots when it comes to innovation in the space, with over $20 billion committed in R&D investments towards development of 5G technology. And we also look here at our RAN portfolio available in the US market. It's best in class products across the spectrum, from low band to mid band, millimeter wave. We've got radios in essentially every band that is out there. One of the things, however, which especially as we talk about fixed wireless, that comes up is a concern, a misplaced concern that some folks have, that 3GPP based solutions are really just designed for mobile networks and hence somehow seen unfit for an FWA use case, because clearly mobility or roaming is not a requirement. The user equipment is not a typical battery powered smartphone, but tends to be a CPE device. And that's one of the concerns. But we are pleased to share that many of our products here for fixed wireless broadband, these have been designed from ground up for a home broadband use case. So our CBRS MMU, for instance, here is this is an example. It's a 64T 64R antenna array radio with some cutting edge technologies like beamforming. It's got 16-layer multi-user MIMO that can boost significantly the throughput, expand coverage, and these are very enhanced in those regards as compared to a traditional mobile network RU. Similarly, on millimeter wave, we've got our compact macro radio. It's a 44R radio with a option to split baseband that's integrated. And essentially, the idea there is to simplify tower installation, especially at remote FWA sites that might be in a rural location. This product also has the option to centralize the CU in a public or a private cloud infrastructure, thereby further reducing the TCO. And the 28 gig AU, again, from just a bandwidth standpoint, has got an OBW of 800 megahertz. Can do 8 component carriers, delivering very high throughputs that can reach up to 10 Gbps per radio, with extended range capability that can provide coverage as far as 10 kilometers out. So we'll look at it a little bit more detail in the next slide. But this is a perfectly suited set of products for a fixed wireless use case. And for operators or wireless ISPs, one of the last on the right hand side, one of the other issues that comes up is network management. And we, especially when you're looking at deploying broadband services using wireless, the ability to measure network utilization in terms of bandwidth utilization by application type, bandwidth utilization at a user level, this can sometimes be challenging if you don't have a robust management system in place. So Samsung, we offer our AI-powered management system. It's a set of tools and capabilities integrated into a platform we call USM. And this provides just beyond real-time monitoring. It's able to provide very deep network visibility and offers a whole set of tools that can automate site troubleshooting without the need to send a technician on site for things like logging or trace collection, making troubleshooting very easy, give you full network visibility into how the network health is and the key KPIs. So in summary, as if you are a operator looking to deploy a fiber network and add some FWA to cover some areas or expand coverage, or if you are a pure play wireless ISP looking for fixed wireless solutions to complete your BEAD project, Samsung truly is one of the best positioned vendors in the US market today, with a wide selection of radio products, complete management solutions to support your FWA needs. So this slide, as we talked about, is looking at our performance of our millimeter wave radio. One of the main benefits of FR2 spectrum in the millimeter wave band is that there is a lot of it available. The 28 gigahertz band can, as I mentioned, 800 megahertz total spectrum can deploy 8 component carriers on this radio. The challenge with millimeter wave has been that it did not go very far in its early sort of implementations, was highly susceptible to interference, and the range just wasn't there. So while it may not be a big issue for certain type of mobile network use cases, especially if you're looking at adding hotspots or data showers, that wasn't quite an issue. But for FWA and fixed wireless home broadband, that range issue could be a huge problem. So at Samsung, we have addressed this issue. We've essentially added a number of innovative new features that we collectively refer to as extended range NR. And last year, what the slide is showing is we demonstrated this truly extraordinary capability in a field test of this product. We're able to reach distances of 10 kilometers. Achieving a record-setting speed of 1.7 Gbps at the far edge, and that just speaks to how this product is truly very well suited for a fixed wireless use case. And we have similar extended range capabilities that are getting added to our other NR products for FW as well. So why Samsung? I think I touched on some of this, but just to kind of reiterate, there is our licensing model is very simple. We've got a full set of products, but from a software licensing standpoint, we have a very simplified model, and it's not complicated. So you know exactly what your capex and opex outlay is going to be. Samsung is got a dedicated team on the sales side, in our support organization to support regional operators and wireless ISPs. And overall, this is we've got not just products, we also have a full services capabilities to support any field work. If you need support services, there is a dedicated team in place to provide that. So I'm going to just move to the next slide in the interest of time. And this is just recapping, the BEAD dollars and how you stretch them with the use of fixed wireless along with fiber, or in cases where you're a pure play wireless ISPs, what are the benefits with fixed wireless? So clearly, from a time to deploy standpoint and from the cost of deployment, with fiber, a project could easily take several months, but with wireless, it's a much shorter time cycle to deploy. It's from a cost standpoint almost 60% less expensive deploying wireless as compared to fiber. And if you look at just from a BEAD economic standpoint, then for all the broadband, 112 million or so broadband service locations, the total funding available after you take out all the overheads is anywhere between 38 to 40 billion. And that the average subsidy then adds to about $3,500 per broadband service location. And as Rob had pointed out, that is just not enough money. Because if you look at cost of rolling out fiber, on an average in the US, it's about $7,500. and per broadband service location. And in areas that are in remote places like Montana or Nebraska, that could be as high as $10,000 to $15,000. So there isn't clearly enough capital to just build out fiber everywhere. And wireless then, because of its speed of deployment and its low cost of deployment, is a great option. And with Samsung and our partners, T3, you've got now a partner that you can reach out to. So please give us a call. Here is our contact information on this slide. If there is you need help with a BEAD project or with just any other fixed wireless type of a deployment, please reach out to us. So with that, I'm going to turn time back for some Q&A, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, we are ready for the Q&A. And as a reminder, questions can be submitted using the Q&A tabs on the left corner of your screen. We've already had a lot of great questions come through, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. So with that said, let's dive in. One of the first questions we saw come through, you mentioned 3GPP-based fixed wireless access is becoming mainstream. Can you comment on the FWA growth trends in the U.S., specifically its success with some major operators?
Sure. As we look at the FWA trends, we mentioned some of this, but according to a survey from Wells Fargo, nearly 60% of the US broadband industry net adds last year came from fixed wireless. And globally speaking, the operator revenues around FWA are poised to grow at almost 400% CAGR annual growth. And as we talked about in just U.S. market, there are some. This has been spectacularly successful with T-Mobile and Verizon collectively today over 6.5 million FWA subs, and that number, by the way, is expected to grow to almost 12-13 million by 2025. So FWA service just from these two operators. So there has been it's been a resounding success, and again, if you look at it against the backdrop of the overall mobile subscriber growth and some of the ARPU challenges faced by the mobile industry, FWA truly is a bright spot, and it is catching the interest of many US regional operators and that are considering 5G upgrades because, again, the standard 3GPP mode of deployment for FWA then opens up the network for other types of scenarios as well, mobile services, roaming services, and that opportunity does exist. And as for operators, it's one of the things that we've seen is it's also works very well because it's a very asymmetrical type of usage trend. Because mobile traffic on these networks tends to peak typically in the hours of 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And broadband usage picks up after 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So it works out very well to have a 3GPP based FWA network that then can be extended for other use cases as well. So those are some of the trends that we observe, but clearly the biggest one that we talked about is this shift from proprietary closed systems towards 3GPP or 5G based FWA.
Great, thank you. And what frequency for fixed wireless is being considered? 5G and CBRS can have issues with penetrating foliage, and some people might have concerns about some locations. So they want to know your thoughts on the frequency for the fixed wireless being considered.
Sure. So I'll take this, and then maybe Rob, you can also chime in on what we've seen in the field. One of the main benefits actually with 3GPP and whether it is 3.5 band or other licensed bands is the ability to sustain connectivity and not drop throughput as capacity goes up. And as you get into these non-line of sight or near line of sight type of environments where you don't have a clear line of sight to the CPE, we've, in our experience, 3GPP solutions scale well and perform well in those environments. And that's one of the biggest advantages over some of these proprietary systems, because there is no core in place, and these radios are essentially doing a good job of managing interference, but they are not able to penetrate through foliage and some of the environmental issues. So they tend to work very well in clear line of sight, but in non-line of sight and near line of sight, we found that LTE and 5G based systems operate much better. But Rob, please.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think the benefit of CBRS, especially for BEAD, is that it's a license by rule, meaning that you've got in every county 80 megahertz of spectrum available to be shared through the spectrum allocation system. And most carriers that are going to be looking at this may not have licensed spectrum, so it becomes an option. Our experience doing both 5 gigahertz and CBRS solutions, and CBRS, the band, has a much better penetration, near line of sight capabilities than the 5 gigahertz. And because of the SAS system, it's got better frequency mitigation, better not quite interference mitigation. That's still coming, I believe, in some next generation parts of the SAS. But because it's free and it has a tremendous amount of contiguous bandwidth, it's a very strong play. And that's where a majority, not everybody, but a majority of our customers have migrated their fixed wireless very successfully. The power, people complain about the power if they've not experienced it or designed for it, but you can design for a very robust, very reliable network that is as reliable as any fiber network.
Wonderful. And during the presentation, you mentioned that a new tower would be roughly $200,000. One of our participants wants to know, is that based on a mid-band upgrade to an existing tower? How did we reach that 200,000 estimate?
Yeah, just experience from us building a few thousand towers nationwide, just what it would take to put a single mast up and try to do this in a cost-effective manner, but certainly you could put a lot more on it or share it with other people if you needed to. But this is just our experience on what a typical solution that we've built in other markets using a CBRS 3GPP solution could cost.
Mm-hmm. And do any of the speakers here have thoughts regarding fixed wireless access at MM wave frequencies? Or known MM wave deployments, MM wave applications? Thoughts on that matter?
Yeah, I'll jump in, TJ. I think this is something we're looking at, even more so today. Millimeter wave really are the bands, typically 28, 29, 60 gigahertz solutions, 39 gigahertz solutions. They tend to be more urban based just because it's a very line of sight. Sometimes it doesn't take much to interfere with it. But there are some new technologies coming out to extend the range from a kilometer to many kilometers and have very high capacity associated with that. It tends to be licensed frequency for below 60 gigahertz, but even at 60 gigahertz, there are certain use cases, exurban, suburban, some rural markets where it's very cost effective. And as TJ and Jeff said together, the speed at which the ability to go put these up and get customers on your network is so much faster in so many cases than compared to fiber that, again, it should be part of the portfolio to be looked at. But I'll send it to TJ or Jeff if they've got any additions on that.
Yeah, let me, sorry,
Jeff.
TJ, I'll just jump in. We've seen discussions around millimeter wave being used as a fiber extension. So you may have fiber as your primary connectivity tool, and then there are going to be locations where it really, again, exceeds a high cost threshold. And so you'll use some of these newer technologies that Rob is talking about to essentially extend that fiber service tier out to these customers so that they're getting equivalent speeds and services. That's kind of where, within the context of what we're discussing today, we're hearing about operators looking at millimeter wave frequencies.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Very thorough.
Just to sort of add one last point, we've, as I pointed out in the slide, millimeter wave, one of the advantages is the fact that there's quite a bit of spectrum available. The issue had been that, from a range standpoint, the frequency is very susceptible to interference, and you did not have that range. So the Samsung product, we've done those very specific enhancements that you can, around just looking at the subcarrier spacing and how we could put some tweaks in to extend the range. And with those enhancements, now we are able to reach really long distances. And we've tested this up to 10 kilometers, delivering over a gig speed. So that is a field test, and then we've done PR around it as well. So a lot of customers in the US. Verizon has big deployment with 28 gigahertz millimeter wave FWA, and that's a proven technology now.
Thank you all. I know we've touched on this briefly, but would you mind summarizing the primary factors that differentiate today's fixed wireless access from the past?
Rob, you want to take that, or?
I think the engineering tools are robust, the reliability of the products, the spectrum. I mean, the amount of spectrum that's been made available over the past 5 years is, I think, the largest since PCS and cellular service started being released in the US 30 years ago. So you've got new spectrum, higher capacity spectrum, stronger radios like massive MIMO, multi-user MIMO, both scalable up and down in terms of antennas, the antenna design. This is not your analog cellular network. This is a very purposely built, as TJ said, purposely built products for this that optimizes both the spectrum and the technology capabilities.
Yeah, and sorry, I keep interrupting you, TJ. I'll say that, all those things that Rob just talked about allow operators to deliver speeds that are equivalent to fixed broadband. And, the growth of subscribers at T-Mobile and Verizon is reflective of the fact that it is a viable fixed broadband technology, whereas in previous generations, that just wasn't there. And I think operators have changed how they price and package their service as well. Previously there were pretty strict data caps, for example, and these things have gone away as they've realized that they have an opportunity here to address a subscriber base that wants service, just maybe not necessarily from their cable provider.
Right. Yeah, just to add one last point. So 5G has been a true game changer here. And one of the things that, it's spectrally a lot more efficient. And then, as Rob pointed out, there's a lot more bandwidth. So this is now, become, and you add the robustness of, the 3GPP and the stability that these solutions can provide. So this is FWA. We like to say this is FWA that actually works. And I know every vendor says that, but there's now enough validation and proof point. And, if you look, there is actually a report out from Recon Analytics, which looks at the Net Promoter Score, which is essentially measuring the customer satisfaction with wireless broadband against, other forms of broadband, cable and fiber included. And one of the interesting things is the customer satisfaction scores for FWA-based broadband are now, exceeding what you have from cable, and in some cases even fiber. So it's really setting a new benchmark in customer satisfaction as well. So that's in addition to the numbers we talked about with the growth that T-Mobile and Verizon have. There is also, from a customer satisfaction standpoint, the service seems to be operating very well.
Wonderful. And we're just coming up on time, so we only have time for one or two more questions. We could quickly answer these for our guests. Regarding Samsung's numbers, someone wants to know which CPEs were used to reach the results presented in the Samsung slide.
So they're referring to the 28 gigahertz field test that we talked about. There is it was a class 1 CPE, but we'll have to get back to them on exactly what make model that was. But we are, if they reach out to us, we are happy to get you that information.
Wonderful. And if somebody's working in R&D for hardware and software in-house, how can they use your solutions and development for their customers?
Please give us a call and reach out to us, and we'll see what your needs are and see if we can work together.
Okay. And with that, any final words? And if not, we will wrap up the webinar. Okay. Well, thank you. That concludes our Q&A session, and that concludes our webinar as well. Thank you to everybody for attending this Fierce Biotech webinar and submitting so many thoughtful questions. We weren't able to get to them all, but we will do our best to get back to everyone who submitted personally after the webinar. I'd like to personally thank our speakers for participating, and Fierce Wireless for presenting, and Samsung for sponsoring today's webinar. As a reminder, a recorded version of this presentation will be available for you to access within 24 hours using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.